Hey Optimantis, Chris here. So today we're talking about your character dying. Specifically, how they might die when they drop to 0 hit points. Morbid topic, I know, but they changed the rules for this in 1D&D, and I have some serious questions about the redesign. I'm not sure if it's written as it's intended or not. You'll see what I mean. I'd like to take a moment to thank some of my patrons. These folks are mage level patrons who provide a great deal of support to this channel. Anyone interested in lending their support, a link to my Patreon page is in the video description. It's always greatly appreciated. So thank you to Hey Mr. Wonderful, Arden, Babrak, Blue Wolf, Blue Eyes White 7, Brian Delgado, Condor, John D, Descarpus9, El Conquistadorito, Eric H, Falcon Neal, Glenn Wilson, Hannah Hutchins, Jared Huberger, John Wayne, Joseph Hall, Joseph Robideau, Joseph Rogers, Wu Carl Kong, Lila Corpsegrave, Makatu, Lone Pilgrim, Maddie, Michael Michelle, Moxie, Nemo, Prometheo NTG, Purge Thunder, Reichenstahl, Ryan Wilmot, Samwise, Shane and Todd Beyond, Taftash, Earshine, The Noam Chomsky, Third, Valentin, Vo, and Wade. An additional thank you to all my patrons, who all have the opportunity to see these videos early, by the way, and without YouTube ads. Let's get started. In 5th edition, the rules for this fall under dropping to 0 hit points in Chapter 9 of the Player's Handbook. Not all these rules got replaced with the 1D&D playtest, but a number of them do. It begins by saying if you drop to 0 hit points, you either outright die or fall unconscious. Then there's 5 sections: instant death, falling unconscious, death saving throws, stabilizing a creature, and monsters and death. Each section fleshes out the rules for unconsciousness and death. Let's just quickly review these. The first section is instant death. It says, if the damage that drops you to 0 hit points has so much damage left over that it equals or exceeds your hit point maximum, then you die outright. So if your character has 20 maximum hit points, but 10 hit points currently, and you take 30 points of damage, that's it. Bye-bye. This section tends not to come up very much at high levels because monsters just don't do enough damage in a single hit to exceed your hit point maximum very often. At low levels, especially at level 1, this comes up a lot. Let's say your first level character is facing the CR1 Half Ogre from the Monster Manual, and that Half Ogre is using their battle axe with 2 hands. If it hits your character, it's probably doing 14 points of damage, which is probably going to drop your character, but it likely won't kill them. But if that Half Ogre scores a critical hit, then that average damage jumps all the way up to 25. That is enough to kill most full hit point player characters at level 1 with a single hit. And that's just the average damage on a critical. If it rolls well, it could be much higher. Now, I don't know if it was intended that instant death is a major first level concern, but can largely be forgotten at high levels, but I do find that's how it works out. Then we have falling unconscious. This one is simple. It says if you drop to 0 hit points and you aren't killed outright, then you fall unconscious. It also says the unconsciousness ends if you regain any hit points. So that is wonderfully clear and simple, and yes, they removed it in the most recent playtest. I'm not sure I understand the why, but how it was replaced is a bit weird to me. I should mention that the unconscious condition saw some minor changes as well, but these are just wording changes. It basically works the same as it did in 5th edition, but it uses more technical language. Like in 5th edition it says you can't move, but in 1D&D it says your speed is 0 and can't change. So, I mean, it's tomato, tomato. Then we have the section on death saving throws, which I will abbreviate. So, if you start your turn with 0 hit points, you roll a saving throw that isn't tied to an ability score. You roll a d20, and if the roll is 10 or higher, you succeed. Now, it is interesting, and I think not well known, that because it says if the roll is 10 or higher, rather than if the total is 10 or higher, that means, technically speaking, we're using the result of the d20 before any modifiers. So if you're blessed, or you're in a paladin aura, it doesn't matter, at least if we read this as worded. If you roll a 10 or higher, it counts as a successful death saving throw, and if you don't, it counts as a failed death saving throw. Then it's a race to 3. If you reach 3 successful saves first, you become stable. If you reach 3 failed saves first, you die. If you roll a natural 1, it counts as 2 failures, and man, I have seen a lot of PCs die from that. If you roll a nat 20, you regain 1 hit point, meaning you're no longer unconscious, and it's still the start of your turn, so you can hop up from prone and start taking your turn. Some of my favorite moments in D&D have happened when someone rolls a 20 on a death saving throw. How about you? Share your nat 20 death save stories in the comments. If you take any damage at 0 hit points, it counts as a failed death saving throw. And if it's from a critical hit, you suffer 2 failed death saves. What really matters here is that if you're unconscious, any attack that hits when the attacker is within 5 feet is automatically critical, so this kills your character really fast. Then we go to the section on stabilizing a creature, which basically says if you become stable, you stop making death saving throws. But if you take any damage, you start again. It also says that the stable but unconscious creature regains a hit point after D4 hours, and when you gain that hit point, hooray, you're conscious again. Finally, there is the section on monsters and death that says, as far as monsters are concerned, you should just ignore all these rules and have the monster die when it falls to 0 hit points, but the DM might make exceptions. I know if I'm the DM, the creature dies at 0 hit points, I would say 99% of the time. Having the player characters walk around finishing off unconscious enemies seems pretty morbid to me, and I don't think it adds anything. Recently, I did run a battle where the PCs actually weren't trying to kill the opponents because it was more of a duel than a fight to the death. So I gave the NPCs death saving throws, then the player characters were actually going around and healing them so they didn't die. So it is useful to have that flexibility when it works for your game. So that is how dying works in 5th edition. It's not perfect, but I'll give it this. The rules are simple and clear. The changes in the most recent playtest, well, they aren't. Dying is now an official condition, and it says that this replaces the sections for falling unconscious, death saving throws, and stabilizing a creature. So the rules for instant death if you take massive damage haven't changed, and the rules for monsters usually dying when they reach 0 hit points hasn't changed either. Everything else is replaced. Such as the rule right here that says the unconsciousness ends if you regain any hit points. That's gone. So now if we want to know how unconsciousness ends, we need to take a look at the new dying condition in the playtest document. So here it is. 0 hit points. You have 0 hit points. Yeah, I know. If you regain any hit points while dying, this condition ends on you. Knocked out. You have the unconscious condition. So this means we now have 2 conditions, both dying and unconscious. Death saving throws. Bit of a wording change here, but one part of the wording didn't change. If the roll is 10 or higher, you succeed. So once again, modifiers don't matter. Rolling a 1 or 20. When you roll a 1, it counts as 2 failures. If you roll a 20, you regain 1 hit point, so that's the same. If you get 3 failures, you die, and that's the same. Here with 3 successes though, we see a really weird change. On your 3rd success, you regain 1 hit point, and that's new. This condition ends on you as normal, but you are still unconscious and you start a short rest. You remain unconscious until you regain any hit points or until another creature uses an action to administer first aid on you, which requires a successful DC 10 Wisdom Medicine check. And there's quite a bit to unpack here, so I'm going to come back to this in one moment. First, let's finish up with damage. If you take any damage, you suffer a death save failure and 2 on a critical, so that's the same. Back to 3 successes. Let's break this down. You regain 1 hit point, but you remain unconscious. It gives you 2 ways that the unconscious condition can be removed. Either you regain hit points or you receive first aid. So this is a big difference with first aid because it means instead of stabilizing a dying creature, it brings someone who has already made 3 successful death saving throws back to consciousness. However, the rule for stabilizing a creature with a medicine check is one of the ones that was replaced, meaning you can no longer stabilize a creature with a medicine check anymore. In fact, reading through this, there is nothing about stabilizing at all. The rules for stabilizing a creature are gone, which actually means when the healer's kit says you can use it to stabilize a creature with 0 hit points, that doesn't mean anything anymore. Does it mean we treat the creature like it made 3 successes on death saving throws and regains a hit point? Maybe, but that's really unclear. Every rule that explained what stabilization was has been removed. Then we have the new Spare the Dying cantrip. It says you touch a creature that has the dying condition and it regains 1 hit point. Now, the way they've done the new dying condition, they did have to change Spare the Dying because the 5th edition version says the creature becomes stable, but there's no such thing as being stable with 0 hit points anymore. On the other hand, I look at the dying condition and it does not say if you have 0 hit points and regain 1 hit point, you're treated like making 3 successful death saving throws. It says if you regain any hit points while dying, this condition ends on you, and then there are some exceptions made under 3 successful death saving throws. When I went over this playtest in a previous video, there was a lot of speculation in the comments how this is supposed to work. Some speculated that maybe if you regain 1 hit point, like with Spare the dying condition is removed, but you're still unconscious. And maybe that's what they intended, but that's not how a removal of a condition normally works. Like, there are lots of conditions that give you other conditions. Like, for example, if you are stunned, you are also incapacitated. But when the stun condition ends, you do not stay incapacitated. It's part of being stunned, so when you're no longer stunned, you are no longer incapacitated. So presumably, if you are no longer dying, then you're no longer unconscious, except where it specifically says otherwise right here after making 3 successful death saving throws. So that would mean that Spare the Dying removes the dying condition, and since a hit point was recovered by a method other than making 3 successful death saving throws, the unconscious condition, being part of the dying condition, would also be removed. But if you do not have a way to restore hit points, there is no way to stop the death saving throws on a dying creature. No medicine check, no healing kit, nothing. That is a huge departure from 5th edition. So that's how it works. My big question is whether that's how it's supposed to work, because these changes are odd. In 5th edition, it's simple. If you have 0 hit points, you're down, but if you have 1 hit point, you're up. Now, if you have 0 hit points, you're down, but if you have 1 hit point, you're up, unless you aren't up, because of the exception of 3 successful death saving throws, which is kind of like being stable, but it's not called being stable, but can only be achieved through die rolls. So, what are they trying to accomplish here? This is just puzzling. Because one of the stated goals of 1D&D is it's supposed to address some of the issues with 5th edition. Well, one of those issues is player characters popping up and down in combat. So changing a cantrip that used to stabilize a creature, so now it brings them back up to consciousness, is a very weird move. And I've been trying to wrap my head around what are they trying to achieve with these changes? And I wonder, maybe the idea was, if you were at 0 hit points, you're dying, but stabilizing you involves you regaining 1 hit point? So maybe the Spare the Dying cantrip was supposed to do the same thing as making 3 successful death saving throws. These are just questions because the rules definitely don't say that. I mean, if that is the intention, then it is fixable. Here's what you would do. You would change this 3 successes entry, and instead it would say, on your 3rd success, or if another creature uses an action to administer first aid on you, which requires a DC 10 Wisdom Medicine check, you regain 1 hit point. Then you remove all the rest right here. Then you would have one more entry for being stabilized, and it would say stable. If you have the dying condition and regain 1 hit point, you are stabilized. This condition ends on you, but you are still unconscious and start a short rest. You remain unconscious until you regain any hit points. And what this change would do is the healer's kit or successful medicine check would now clearly give you 1 hit point and make you stable, but you would remain unconscious. The Spare the Dying cantrip would give you 1 hit point and make you stable, but you would remain unconscious. 3 successful death saving throws would give you 1 hit point and make you stable. If you rolled a natural 20 on a death saving throw, you would regain 1 hit point and become stable, but remain unconscious. Don't know how I feel about that, because yes, it does involve popping up and down, but like I said before, some of those nat 20 death saving throws have been really memorable and fun experiences in gaming, and I would hate to give those up. In addition, a character fed a good berry would regain 1 hit point and become stable but remain unconscious. A character given 1 hit point of healing from Paladin's Lay of Hands would regain 1 hit point and become stable, but if they were healed 2 points, they would regain consciousness. So if that is the intention of designers, that rewording would work. It would make it a bit harder to just pop up from being unconscious, which is kind of a good thing, But I have no idea if that's what they're trying to achieve with this whole 1 hit point and still unconscious thing. Like, if that's not the intention, but this is all worded exactly as they intended, well then, first off, we need to know how healers' kits work now, and I would also want an explanation on what they're trying to achieve here, because it seems like it makes an issue with 5th edition worse, not better, and it is more complicated. That seems like a lose-lose. I'd ask if any of you have the idea what their goal is here. Let's discuss it in the comments, because maybe I'm missing something. Maybe there's a design reason for these changes, and if I read it, then I'll understand. So if you have the secret, please share it. So this will be something I'll be giving feedback on when I complete my survey. This needs clarification at the bare minimum, but probably needs some redesign, or it takes an issue with 5th edition and makes it worse, not better, and it adds complexity rather than simplification. Once again, I encourage you all to fill in your surveys and let the designers know your opinions on this stuff. I don't want to tell anyone what feedback they should provide. That's your decision, not mine. But I at least wanted to bring to your attention how these rules interact now, so at least when you do fill in your survey, you would at least know how these rule changes are going to affect your game, so you can decide for yourself if you like them or not. Otherwise, until next time, I am going to sit back, relax, and have some fun. D&D is for everyone. Thanks everybody, and I'll talk to you soon.